Welcome to the Talent Learning Show podcast, episode 86 with independent learning tech analyst John Lay. Today I interview John Waite, principal and executive BrainStorm, about how modern organizations are getting the most out of their software investments. You can find more of our fiercely independent content at talentedlearning.com. Well, welcome back, listeners, to the Talent Learning Show podcast. On this show, I am fortunate to interview the world's leading experts in learning solutions from both the vendor and the practitioner perspectives. Well, today's no different. From the expert side of the fence, I'm absolutely thrilled to have the long-term owner of BrainStorm to help us think through a familiar target of training customers on your software, but through a completely new and broader solution lens than normal. One of the parts of the job about being an independent analyst that studies learning technology is that I constantly have to relearn, as it turns out, that you have to be humble. Every time I feel like I've caught up and I've seen it all, a new company, a new solution, segment technology, integration, use case, success metric, measurement approach in general surfaces, and I quickly realized that I had a blind spot that I didn't know about. And those are the worst kind of blind spots. If you know about them, they're not, I guess, so blind. And I'm sure there's more. So everybody keep contacting me and telling me about your new mousetraps and technology. As I said, that's the best part about the job. But anyway, that's how I felt when I met BrainStorm organization at the SEDMA, or the Customer Education Conference this year in Atlanta. After meeting them and seeing how they see the world, I had to update my thinking about what it is or where is the intersection of customer education, employee education, and software investment. There's a lot of value to be had there to do it right. And there's probably a lot of value that listeners of this podcast are leaving on the table by not probably thinking more expansively than you have before. And so that's what I knew I had to have John on the podcast today to tell us all about it and teach us what we need to know. John, welcome to the Talent Learning Show podcast. Sure great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate it.
All right, cool. Well, I can't wait to hear, but why don't we start at the top and tell us about BrainStorm and, how you acquired the company originally now over 2 decades ago. Tell us the story. We'll get the ball rolling from there and we'll start digging in.
No, absolutely. Sure. BrainStorm has been around for a while, as you mentioned. It was founded out of WordPerfect and Novell, some folks that were working there. For those who know those names and are familiar with those names, know the time frame we're talking about here. But it was a software training and publishing business. So originally it would publish these 300-page user manuals, and organizations would buy those and deliver those to their employees. My business partner and I acquired the business in the early 2000s. And I think the reason why is because we felt that at that time we felt that users and employees were kind of waiting on technology to be developed to accelerate their productivity and make them more effective. And we could tell that the pace of that innovation was going fast enough that the day would come when the world would flip. And the technology would be waiting on people to catch up to it. That the pace of technology would outpace the sort of the learning pace, the rate at which people learned how to use that software. So we said, you know what, we want to be part of that. This is an exciting world, and so we acquired the business, and since then I have leveraged the technology as it's become available. We no longer are a publishing business or even a live instructor-led training business like we once were. Today we have a SaaS platform where that we support software vendors, those who sell software as well as those who buy software, in getting the fullest usage out of the products that they're selling and buying.
Wow, cool. That's a great story. So I think what's unique is your target audience of really supporting those that sell software and those that use it, as because they're really two different groups. And a lot of times in customer education, or most times in customer education, we're really focusing on the organizations that sell the software. But from your perspective, both are really the same. What are the biggest challenges, or maybe the state of customer education in terms of software and software adoption from your perspective? How do you see the industry right now, and what gaps are there? Where are organizations not doing as much as they should?
Sure. That's a good question. And I think so our expertise is particularly in the software piece of customer education, right? So we're always educating a user on how to use the tools that they have for work. And in the state of things today is users are frankly kind of overwhelmed. They have a level of sort of app exhaustion. It's a There's a famous investor at Andreessen Horowitz who coined the term software is going to eat the world, and it definitely has. Software has eaten the world, and a user today has dozens of applications that they're licensed to use. And there's research by experts, other experts in the field, including ourselves. We can see this data, but even groups like Pendo and WalkMe and Productive show that users are using maybe 20% of the capabilities of the software that they have. And they're often not even aware of half of the software that they're licensed for because it's just has come at them so quickly and so fast. So that's a little bit newer phenomenon. I mean, it's a cloud-based era phenomenon. Once the cloud sort of evolved and that technology was adopted by enterprises, then the barrier for software development and entry into the market was lowered quite a bit. And so there's a lot of software that all of a sudden came into the market, and the software is amazing. It delivers a lot of value, but users are usually where that value leaks is with your user population it's not because they're lazy, it's not because they don't want to learn, it's not because they can't learn, it's because the task is that large.
Hmm, interesting. So, John, whose responsibility is it, in your view, to train these users on the use of that software? Is it their IT department? Is it the customer education department of the software provider, uh, or
Yes,
both?
I think we spend a lot of time thinking about that because we're trying to solve this challenge in the marketplace, right? And the best answer that we've come up with so far that looks to be absolutely looks to be panning out is everyone. So the software, there's so many parties that have a vested interest in this. So the software vendor that is selling the software, they want users to use their product. That's how they deliver value to their customers. That's how they also can grow accounts. That's how they renew accounts. So they have a vested interest. The user themselves, they would love who wouldn't want to be more productive with the time that they have and be able to have more impact to their business and the way that they manage their day, their professional life. So they have a vested interest. That IT department of that user. So IT departments who are buying software, they're tasked with increasingly so being more than just a break fix type of a department. They have to add to the strategy and the impact of the business that they're serving. And so they have a vested interest. So all parties, BrainStorm has a vested, all parties have this vested interest. So the best solution we've seen is there a way to bring them together to share the data and create visibility of what's happening, and then share the best practices of all of those parties, so that you're aligned, and it's not just lassoing one party with, hey, this is your problem, but everybody, all those parties care about this, so let's bring them all together and let's work on it. Let's collaborate and work on it together with the best of what each of us can bring to the table.
Hmm. Well, conceptually, that makes sense. How do you make that happen, John?
Oh,
How do the vendors talk to the IT departments in collaboration and do all? How would you do that? Well, how do you divide the labor?
sure. Well, the first thing that you have to do is you have to track the data of what's really happening. So one of the things that we do is our platform integrates with the telemetry data of whatever software that we're speaking of to see, well, who is using the software, how are they using it, what buttons are they clicking, what buttons are they not clicking, for example, and then you have to socialize that data and democratize it, if you will, right? So share that with the vendor. Share that with that CSM who's managing this account. Share that with that IT, that customer admin who is also managing it from their perspective, from their end of that transaction. Share it with the user. Share it with all these parties, and they each have a unique lens that they want to see and that they view that data through. So provide that lens to them, and then you also give them, turn the steering wheel over to them in certain ways. So, for example, that software vendor is going to know some best practices that customer won't have benefited from yet because they're a first time, they're a single user, a single company. So let that software vendor create some best practices that customer can borrow from. At the same time, that customer wants some control because they want to customize or they want to tailor those best practices to their organizational needs. And so give them capability as well to respond to that data and to sort of craft their own experience. So the more visibility that all those parties have as to what's actually happening, and the more ability they have to steer the ship or control their own destiny and have a vested interest, then that's where that collaboration happens, and where they all sort of say yes, like they raise their hand. I want to participate in this because I have a vested interest, and we've now, and if you can give them a tool that equips them to do something about it, then that's the solution that we feel is the way to attack that challenge in the market.
So your solution, the brainstorm solution, does that reside with the vendor community then that's selling the software, and they expect learners to come from the different organizations to use their software, or is your solution more focused on the users, the using companies of the software, and it's installed there? Is it both? Help us see how this all pieces together and what it
Sure.
does.
Yeah. So when we're designing product, we have the user at the center of the circle, if you will, of the universe. And sometimes that's a little bit different approach. The educator isn't necessarily like the educator is a customer of ours, those that are creating content that are, but we prioritize the user and what's their experience, because they're the ones that are overwhelmed in this scenario, this problem that we're discussing, and often sort of opt out. They opt out of education. They opt out of like, I'm overwhelmed. This is not a positive ROI experience for me to engage in this learning. So we put them at the center. Then what we do is we have our platform has an instance for every software vendor. So the software vendor is our customer, and we work with them to create those best practices, those experiences that they want to then deliver to their customers. But when it goes to the customer, when it goes to company A, that company is getting their very own instance as well. So it's not a shared instance that all companies are logging into at that software vendor, which is what an academy often is like. But
Mm,
that company is getting their very own instance that they can then customize and again sort of take ownership of, and have a more customer-led adoption, because customers want to do that. They want to solve the adoption problem. They're leaving value on the table when their users don't use the products that they're purchasing.
mm.
Does that make
Okay.
sense? So
It
so
does.
so it's like, think of every customer having their own instance, but the software vendor kind of has this overarching umbrella that they can use to say, hey, we want to make this one change in a best practice, and it'll cascade across all of those companies.
Hmm.
But from a company perspective, their instance is unique to them, and they're not sharing it with any other business.
Hmm. Okay. So so that's great. So I've got this software, XYZ CRM software,
Yeah.
and now company A, like you said, has their own instance, and company B. That's great. But now I need marketing communication software. Now what happens? Now I gotta figure
You,
this
you have to
out
tell
for
people about it, right?
and
You have to let
then
them
like
know.
what about the other 38 software applications that I'm managing? Like how does this all come together?
Yeah, that you're hitting on what is probably one of the main pain points of that IT professional in the organization. Is their world today is, hey, if you're a large enterprise, you have over 1,000 different SaaS applications that you've purchased, and probably no single IT person is managing all 1,000. But if you are an IT person, you are managing dozens of applications within your organization. And the state of affairs today is, if you want your users to be educated on those various applications, you are sending them to those academies in all unique destinations, right? That's not the experience you would craft if you had the user at the center of the problem, right? And if you were trying to optimize the experience for the user, that's not quite what you would build. And it makes sense of how the market evolved this way because there weren't 1,000 SaaS applications just handfuls of years ago. So this is a newer problem, a newer phenomenon, but we hear it every day from our customers. Is like, look, I can't send my users to 20 different academies. That's nonsense to me. So there has been some aggregation in the overall corporate education space. There's learning experience platforms that have done this. So companies like Degreed have said like, hey, let me layer over these 6 LMS platforms that you have and create a unique and singular user experience. And so we've seen that in the overall corporate education space. We believe that that is happening and needs to happen in the software specific adoption space as well. And we would draw a distinction between corporate education. There are some unique elements about software adoption that are well unique. They're different than what other corporate education is. So software adoption is very dynamic. Like these software applications are being updated hundreds of times a quarter. And so it's a moving target, right? That's a lot more dynamic than some type of compliance education or diversity education or all the other elements that are corporate education. And so we think a similar movement needs to take place on the software adoption side, which is a movement we're trying to be a part of and to aggregate this. So if you are a BrainStorm customer, what happens is you send your users to just BrainStorm, to just that instance that's yours, that's company A has that singular instance. It doesn't only just address Microsoft or Box or whatever, Adobe. It addresses all the software that you would delivering to your users. So you still have that singular user-centered experience, but you're benefiting from the best practices of all those vendors and the content. I mean, some of those best practices also are content and all those, everything that comes with it.
So if they have an instance of your software from one of the vendors, they have the opportunity to buy or license the training from any of your customers or
Correct.
any of your software customers. So each incremental software customer that you acquire or land is one more piece of the puzzle that all of your customers could take advantage of from that software from their same instance. Am I getting this right?
Yes. Yes. So
Super cool.
so you're right. So if you are again company A and you're being introduced to our platform through Microsoft,
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft is not the only tool that you will find in that platform. You will have, it's a marketplace effectively, right? So you'll see a menu and it'll say, hey, we support these other vendors as well in the adoption of their tools. And the other benefit of this too is um, that allows that company A person to coordinate the adoption across vendor types. Because a user doesn't come to work and say, "Oh, I've got an hour. I'm going to do some Microsoft work right now, and then I'm going to do some, CRM work." That's not how they work. And so you have to see when we talk about seeing the data, yes, you have to see the data for that specific vendor, but you want to see the data holistically for the user and what's happening as they jump from vendor application to vendor application. And we see that. And therefore, we can craft optimal experiences for that user across vendors because we're aggregating those vendor experiences into our platform. So yes, I
Wow.
think the short answer is yes. What you said and how you interpreting it, I think we're talking the same language.
All right, cool, cool. This is uh yeah, it's different. So I'm just trying to draw a box around
Yeah.
it because we're always just focusing on that software vendor that's creating the academy. It
Yes.
seems like, and
Well,
not the IT owner. So are you seeing results? Are what kind of results do these
no,
organizations see by centralizing this?
absolutely. The first result that you want to see is just engagement, increased engagement. So, um, we can see data. When I say we, in this case, the industry can see data around user engagement with their learning, right? And now also with their usage of the software, and that's not great. It's a lot of users, if it's not compulsory, because software education usually is not a compulsory topic. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, you should do this because it's going to benefit you. So figure out a way to work it into your day. And who can figure out how to work something else into their day usually? And we are users, right? We all have the experience of that pop-up, that window that says, hey, here's what's new. And what do we do usually? Red X, top right, just get
Quick
me
as I can.
as quick as we can. And that's because you're human and because you're smart actually and you're rational. And that's usually a rational experience. So the first thing you want to do is get engagement. And our data shows that most academies for software adoption specifically, right? Most academies are drawing maybe 2.5 to 5% of monthly active usage of their user population. And so that's a few, but the majority of the users have opted out. They're like, I'm not participating in this. And so our data is we're running usually 40 to 50%
Wow.
MAU with our experience. And there's things you have to do to accomplish that. And I'll just share maybe one real quickly. I do want to say that we're discovering this. Like we have hypotheses, but we're testing and we're constantly saying, well, what if we try this and what if we try this? And we're trying to discover what the new model should be. Education that's used, the model of education that's used in software today is like 300 years old. It's like it's Prussian. It's the sort of where we draw the word kindergarten from. It's the model that you and I went to school with. And there's been some innovations. I love Sal Khan saying like let's flip the classroom. Like I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of like let's just try different things because we have to. There should be innovation, more innovation, and software adoption I believe is a unique space to try the innovation because you can actually see how it's applied. There's so many things in corporate education where you don't get to view what the application is. You can test for competency and you can test for, certification level of understanding, but you don't really get to see. With software, you do. You get to see not only are they competent, but did they now go do that thing in the software that we just taught them how to do? And so testing in our space is very effective because we have the full data cycle, the full loop, a feedback loop of data. And so one of those getting that's a little tangent, apologize, but that one thing is it needs to be very relevant to this user. John, there absolutely is something that I could teach you about one of your software tools that will change the way you work from here on out. I just have to know what that is and then if I can share that with you, you're not going to hit the red X. You're going to
Yeah.
engage. And so training has been very one size fits all for good reason. It's been terribly expensive to go and do, like, you can't do ILT one-on-one, not for your whole organization. That's prohibitive. But with today's technology, you can, because I can watch how every user uses the software. And there's technology to process that information and data and to make sense of it, and then to make recommendations as to what is more relevant. And so we don't have that 100% figured out, but we've got a lot of it figured out. And so
Mhm.
so we see engagement multiple times higher because of the relevancy of that. The second thing is if you are relevant, users will allow you to communicate with them. Like you will not be intrusive if you bring value to the table. And so our platform has proactive communication capabilities, right? So we're gonna email, we're gonna chat, we're gonna Slack, we're gonna notify, like we're gonna do those things. And actually, we're also gonna learn not every user wants to. A user will respond differently to those channels, and certain types of messages they will respond differently to those channels too. So depending upon what you're asking them to do, there's a preferred channel usually. So you want to communicate as least invasively as possible, and you actually want the whole educational experience to be least invasive as possible. So let me kind of maybe double click just on that last point. I've been in the industry for these 20 plus years, so I've lived this. And I've lived through, hey, we want to maximize consumption of our education content because that's how we deliver value. We're not doing that anymore. What we're actually trying to do is minimize the amount of investment a user has to take in education to get the adoption that they're driving towards. So it's an inverse. It's all of a sudden an inverse metric in our space. And if we can do that, that user is going to come back and they'll engage again. And so not only are we driving this 40 to 50%, we're doing it sustained in a sustained way
Mhm.
because we can't abuse the interaction, the time that the user gives us, we have to treat that as very precious, and we can't abuse it. So we're trying to get them to the benefit of using the software in as short and straight of a path as possible. And so that's yes, you communicate, and you make the most of that experience. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And that has, that would have all kinds of downstream business benefits then too, when on everything, on your churn rate, on the number of calls to customer support, on customer satisfaction
Yeah.
rating, on expansion of the sale, of using adjacent modules. If you got 40% of your folks excelling versus 2% or trying to get to that next level, you can't help but succeed. But this is a fascinating conversation, and like all of our good fascinating conversations, they sure go fast here on this podcast. So we'll get to the last advice question. So for all the IT managers out there that are listening right now and are sending their learners to 1,038 different software sites, what's your best advice, John, for them to kind of draw attention to this and see if they can get the ball rolling in perhaps another direction where they're doing what you say, either with you or somebody else, but to think about this more holistically with the learner at the center?
No, yes, absolutely. I think focus on adoption in lieu of education. Education is on the path. It is the way it is often the way you get to adoption, but it stops a little bit short of the goal, right? In professional education is a means to an end. And in software, that end is the usage of that tool to deliver the value. So I would say focus on adoption and hold feet to the fire on that. That's the true north. And John, it's going to be ugly at first. You have to kind of admit and recognize like, hey, this is probably not good. Like, I don't know if I want to wave this statistic, this data around of like where our adoption is right now, but you're not going to make it better if you don't work on that specific data point. So I would, one, shift your thinking just a little bit. This is not a big shift, but shift it from it's important from education and competency to actual usage, because in our world you can measure that, and that's newer, but you can measure that. So do that, number one. Number two, it's kind of an elephant, and you eat an elephant just like one bite at a time, and that's okay. And be okay with that. Sit in that and realize like, hey, there's not a silver bullet. I mean, we've been doing this for a while. There's not a silver bullet. So it's like, then the next thing I would say is just be okay and just take a bite. Do that next thing. Start with that first problem and have that first victory, and then just keep going and keep going. And because the ocean is too big and the problem's too large to try to boil it that way. You just focus on adoption and delivering that value, and then just take it a step at a time and get started on that journey.
Sage advice from an expert that's been doing it for 20 years. John Wade, principal and owner and executive at BrainStorm. You can find more at brainstorminc.com, and you can learn more about that solution. John, thanks for stopping by the Talented Learning Show today and sharing your expertise. Fascinating discussion, and it was really great to have you here. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Talented Learning Show. Hopefully you learned some stuff here today. I know I did, because we're talking about things in a different way than we normally have, and looking at the problem as I started off today, looking at it through a different lens. It's actually bigger, I think, than we've been giving it credit for, as we really focused on software by software, on how to improve that for an organization that's making the software. And certainly that's very important. We've been talking about it for 10 years. But the other side is just as important also, of thinking about that learner that's going to be receiving that software, and what about their stakeholders, and what about that organization, and what about getting the measurable benefits from that side of the equation, and what if you can do both? And wow, that's a whole new bunch of stuff to worry about at 3 a.m. in the morning if you're in customer education or IT education. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. You can find more of our fiercely independent content at talentedlearning.com. We'll see you on the next. Have a great day.